When we see fully transitioned people on the internet, it's easy to have an image that they knew they were trans from the moment they were born, that they had no doubts along the way. However, lovely audience, today's video, we're going to put that to the test. So I'm going to tell a story of when I nearly gave up transition forever, and why ultimately I decided to transition in the end anyway. There are often bumps in the road of transition, and then I usually document it on YouTube because we try to maintain a little image of, well, perfection, because there's a lot of expectations on trans people, and we can often be invalidated on the internet if we aren't perfectly trans from the second we wake up to the present day. Okay? So as detailed in another video, I used to be in a heterosexual cis-het relationship at the start of high school. However, I A, ended up not being into girls, and B, I wanted to be a girl. So as you can imagine, this relationship didn't really pan out. However, there are some details I didn't really mention about that relationship that is relevant to this story. So in the earlier stages of transition, right, the thing I ended up bumping into was that, well, people didn't really like that I was in a heterosexual relationship with a girl that was straight. So as you can imagine, people were a bit critical of that. As a result, they wanted me to be more of a boyfriend for said girlfriend, and I was ultimately kind of gaslit about it, to be honest with you, lovely audience. During that particular Japan trip, I was egged on a lot to do things that is expected of the boyfriend. Right, the like, let them lean on your shoulder, make sure you initiate hugs, that kind of thing. And ultimately I didn't feel confident or even comfortable doing that kind of stuff. Because that wasn't me. You know, gender stereotypes be danged, but it just wasn't the kind of thing that I was interested in doing. It was easy to feel a bit gaslit because when I wasn't doing stereotypically manly things for my girlfriend, it was a bit, well, wasn't talked about very positively towards me. It would always be, oh, poor her. I guess early on in transition, I came in when I was like 12 and like little kids, so like, you know, maybe just no one really thought about it too much. A lot of the friends I was making, their parents were a bit cautious of me and didn't say the nicest things. Oftentimes I'd get lectured on car rides about gender and told not to do it. Now, some of that did internalize, unfortunately. A lot of parents would often say like, oh, but you look good as a boy, and that kind of stuff. Or like, oh no, you won't be able to look good as a girl. No, you just shouldn't do it. No. Besides, you have a girlfriend. In 2014, well, I broke up with my girlfriend at the time. So I had an opportunity to spread my wings, so to speak. So I guess the things that made people assume I was a very stereotypical cis-het man probably evaporated a little bit. So ultimately in this year, I like to have thought that I did my best to dress up as much as I could. And in the early parts of the year, I think I did. That was when I made great strides in learning how to use wigs and that kind of thing. Actually, I was getting pretty good at it that year. However, I think more and more the judgment of other people began to weigh me down a bit. I know when I was trying to come out to parents, I'd often get told that I'm making everything about being trans, or everything's about gender. If you say it's a construct, why do you talk about it so much? That kind of thing. Why are you letting it affect you? And at the end of the day, it's because I wasn't allowed to transition, so understandably I'd talk about it a lot because I was distressed, I was feeling dysphoric. And yeah, my lack of being able to transition was negatively affecting a lot of things because I wasn't able to do what I needed to do. I didn't have the support that I have today, and there weren't that many trans people online back then, so it was a bit hard to turn to people. And when you did, the trans people that were out there typically followed that came out as a little kid and transitioned as a little kid timeline. I heard here and there rumblings of people that are adults that transition. However, at that time, I actually didn't know any teenagers that started transition as teenagers. I thought that just wasn't a thing, and I felt really isolated for that fact. I thought you either figured it as a little kid or you figured it as an adult. That middle point where you feel like you're not quite a kid but not quite an adult, well, that gets complicated. What makes it even more complicated is the impending doom of careers that gets thrusted upon you around that age. I had dreams, lovely audience. I wanted to be a language teacher in Japan. Ultimately, I chose not to pursue that for other reasons unrelated to my gender. However, at that time, that was what I had my heart set on doing. However, I saw that me transitioning would make that really hard. Japan's not exactly the most accepting to trans people, but neither was Australia at the time, I guess. Thing was, I got insecure that I felt like transition was getting in the way of what I had going good for me. I was really good at Japanese early on. I was improving really fast because I was so dedicated to it. And a lot of people began getting in my head a bit. I was told stuff like, do you really want to throw away your opportunity to go to another place and that kind of thing? Then additionally, people started being like, well, if you weren't like this, you would have still had a girlfriend. And stuff like that hurt. I internalized it, but it hurt. Ultimately, I stumbled across all sorts of YouTube videos centered around self-improvement, which on its own is fine, I think. I think nowadays these are referred to as grind set videos, sarcastically. You know, it's that like, I wake up at like 4 a.m. and do a million push-ups and, you know, that kind of junk. So, I watched a lot of that stuff at that time because I thought it would make me better at studying Japanese. Because if I could master my proficiency and efficiency with study, then I would be really good at it and I'll be able to live my dream. Unfortunately, my school situation was a bit awkward because I was put in an all-boys class because a random science teacher anecdotally heard that putting classes based on gender isolated would make their grades better. And unfortunately, my grades did end up being better that year, but not for the reasons they hurt. I desperately wanted to get out of that class because, well, all my friends are girls, for one. So I tried everything to get out of that class. I studied like crazy, and it unfortunately led to me finding these like improvement-based videos because I wanted to study better. Fundamentally, I was trying to fulfill people's expectations, but also trying to escape a classroom environment I didn't like. What this resulted in was unfortunately sacrificing the part of myself that made me happy. And that's not a way to live. Around this time, I would just study relentlessly, and I stopped dressing up for a time. And I'll be real, that was a really hard time. Dressing up in girls' clothes at home secretly was a really big outlet for me, and it really helped me feel confident and ultimately made me feel less scared and more hopeful of the future that I'd get to dress like that all the time. But then something came in. I watched a romance movie. I think it was 5 centimeters per second or something. Because at the time I only let myself watch Japanese media because I determined that watching stuff that wouldn't help my Japanese was a waste of time. You know, grand set moment. But regardless, I watched this movie and I don't know if it was just something internalized. But for whatever reason, this movie gave me a really weird, warped message. Because when I watched it and saw a sweet romance between a guy and a girl, I guess I got jealous and insecure. Now that I'm further in transition, I get that I like being a girl in a heterosexual relationship with a guy. However, it was hard to see that image at the time. So I felt guilty that I made my relationship with my ex not work out because I was trans. I thought that was the reason I wasn't in a relationship. And I fundamentally was very down and blamed that on myself a lot. There was a brief moment where I remembered because we used to exchange letters when we were dating. I wrote one that I never sent. I don't know where it is. I like to think I threw it out somewhere, but I more or less wrote a letter detailing how I was going to quit wearing girls' clothes forever. Now, I'm glad that in the letter I didn't make it about trying to get back with them. It was more of a announcing who I am now or whatever. But that wasn't me. I remember looking at this message I made, detailing what I was going to do. I really thought about it. And I'm happy to say that I never sent it. I decided it wasn't worth giving up something that made me happy, you know? So, lovely audience, why did I, at the end of the day, decide to transition anyway? Despite fears and anxieties, and despite that initial moment where I nearly gave it up forever. Well, the truth is, lovely audience, in 2014, I was pretty depressed. I wasn't feeling very happy. And when I think back to that time, the happiest moments I remember is those moments where I was in front of the mirror, wig on, had a cute skirt, and I twirled around. In that hard year, when I went back and forth on whether I wanted to dress up or not. Those moments of dressing up and then doubting it. Those moments where I'm like, no, I shouldn't. Those moments where I start explaining to people maybe I shouldn't do it. When I start to believe that I shouldn't do it. When other people constantly tell me I shouldn't do it. But ultimately, lovely audience, one's happiness is more important than someone's approval. You know that bit in the Spider-Man movies where Spider-Man gives up being Spider-Man and Peter Parker goes back and he's suddenly succeeding in school and everyone's super proud and approves of him. However, you can feel something isn't right. Now, a slightly different scenario because, well, he's wrapping around with the fact that he needs to be a hero. However, in my case, I was wrapping my head around the fact that I wasn't happy if I wasn't being me. You know, just because people were more approving of me meant nothing. The most attention I ever got at family gatherings was when I was trying to conform and be a bit more masculine on the basketball team, that kind of thing. But what did it matter? Even if I tried to conform, I wasn't happy. I chose my own happiness over the comfort of people that never really cared about me. It's important to do what makes you happy in this wonderful big planet of ours. And I felt like I was briefly in an alternate timeline, so to speak, where I saw what my life could turn out to be if I never did it. I didn't like it. I fundamentally, in the end of the day, I chose to present how I wanted to present. And I'm glad I made this choice. All choices have risk, and you got to assess those risks when you make them. However, a life without any risk, well, there's going to be a lot of things you might have wished you did. So, follow your heart. That's the message of this. It was a hard time for me, and it was hard to share this, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about it, even if it was a bit brief. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the funny subscribe button and tune in for weekly trans videos. Until then, I'll be off. Stay hydrated and know that you are valid.